Coco Jones leaned back in her first-class seat, expecting a quiet flight after a long tour, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Without warning, a flight attendant approached and slapped her across the face, the shock echoing through the cabin. Passengers froze, eyes wide in disbelief, as the unthinkable unfolded mid-air. This was no ordinary confrontation. It threatened to spiral into chaos at 30,000 feet. What happened next would leave everyone on board and beyond utterly stunned, questioning everything they thought they knew. Coco Jones sank into the plush leather of her first-class seat, exhaustion from her recent tour weighing on her, but her mind still alert. The cabin was quiet, soft lighting reflecting off polished panels, a sense of luxury surrounding her. Yet beneath the calm surface, tension simmered. The flight attendant approaching her wore a carefully maintained smile, but her eyes betrayed a subtle arrogance, a dismissive tilt of the head as if Coco's presence disrupted the usual order. Other staff moved about efficiently, but whispers and sideways glances hinted that Coco was being judged, evaluated in ways that went beyond ordinary protocol. Passengers nearby noticed the small gestures, a sigh, a rolled eye, a quick exchange of words. But many looked away, indifferent, lost in their own worlds. A few curious eyes lingered, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Coco adjusted herself in her seat, pretending to remain relaxed, yet the air carried a quiet tension that suggested this flight would not remain ordinary for long. Something was off, and every subtle glance and gesture hinted that what was about to happen was only the beginning. The flight attendant returned with a tray, her movements precise but carrying an unmistakable edge. She placed the items before Coco with a barely concealed sigh, her eyes rolling slightly as if serving a celebrity was an inconvenience. Snide remarks slipped under her breath, soft enough for most passengers to miss, but sharp enough to sting. Every gesture, from a dismissive wave to a condescending tilt of her head, added weight to the invisible tension building around Coco. Coco sat upright, cradling herself in composure, her hands resting gracefully on her lap, her eyes steady yet alert. She smiled politely, masking the quiet storm of frustration growing inside, aware that any reaction could escalate the situation. Other staff moved past, pretending not to notice, whispering among themselves with nervous glances toward Coco. The atmosphere in first class became charged, passengers sensing an unspoken conflict. Some shifted uneasily in their seats, glancing back, while others tried to focus on their magazines or screens, unwilling to get involved. The subtle hostility lingered like a shadow over Coco, a mounting weight she refused to let crush her. Every action of the flight attendant, every slight smirk or whispered comment built anticipation for what was coming. Coco remained poised, but the air was thick with unspoken consequences. She was not just another passenger. She carried a presence that demanded respect, even if the staff failed to recognize it. But the flight attendant had no idea who she had just crossed. Without warning, the flight attendant's hand shot out and slapped Coco across the face, the sound sharp and jarring, echoing through the otherwise quiet first-class cabin. Coco's head jerked slightly from the impact, her eyes widening in shock, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words coming. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, every passenger frozen, processing the audacity of what had just happened mid-flight. Instinctively, Coco raised a hand toward her face, her body tensing as a rush of protective energy surged through her. Her heart pounded fiercely, yet beneath the initial shock, a spark of controlled anger ignited, a quiet determination that she would not be humiliated or intimidated. Whispers spread immediately, a ripple of murmurs traveling across the cabin. Some passengers gasped audibly, their eyes darting between Coco and the flight attendant, hands clutching armrests or pressing to mouths in disbelief. Others froze in stunned silence, staring wide-eyed at the unfolding drama, unable to comprehend the audacity of the attack. A few leaned forward, curiosity and concern etched across their faces, sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation and that Coco was no ordinary passenger. The flight attendant stepped back, her confident facade faltering, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. She had expected obedience, compliance, or perhaps fear, but she had no idea who she had just crossed. Coco steadied herself, her breathing even, her expression regaining composure, but the tension surrounding her was palpable. Every movement of hers, every subtle adjustment in posture, radiated authority and control, signaling to passengers and staff alike that she would not be cowed. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation and shock. Passengers shifted nervously, some whispering to neighbors, others staring silently, all aware that the incident had escalated far beyond a simple misunderstanding. Eyes followed Coco as she adjusted in her seat, cradling herself with quiet dignity, a stark contrast to the nervous, unsettled staff around her. The first-class cabin, usually a space of luxury and calm, had transformed into a stage of silent tension. The atmosphere charged with the unspoken understanding that this moment would not be forgotten. The flight attendant's arrogance had ignited something far greater than she could imagine. What happened in the next few minutes would shake the airline to its core. Coco Jones took a slow, deliberate breath, her initial shock transforming into controlled determination. She sat upright, every movement precise, radiating authority and confidence. No longer a vulnerable passenger, she became a figure impossible to ignore, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in first class. The whispers and nervous glances from other passengers only reinforced her power. She was a force that demanded respect. Her fingers moved with quiet purpose as she reached for her phone, dialing numbers with calm efficiency. She did not panic, did not yell or accuse. Her voice, steady and measured, carried authority as she explained the situation to those who could enforce immediate consequences. Behind her composure, a storm brewed, and the crew around her began to sense that they were no longer in control. Micro-expressions of panic flickered across the faces of the flight attendants, subtle at first, but growing more pronounced as they realized the gravity of their mistake. Coco's eyes scanned the cabin, meeting the gaze of the airline manager who had approached, summoned by her discreet signal. The manager froze, understanding that this was no ordinary complaint, that the celebrity before them wielded influence and would not tolerate disrespect. Passengers sensed the shift, their murmurs rising into a low hum of anticipation, as Coco maintained control over every word, every gesture. The flight attendant who had struck her now shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the consequences were far beyond what she had imagined. She continued to calmly assert herself, giving instructions for immediate corrective measures. Staff scrambled nervously, whispering among themselves, their confidence shattered by the realization that they had misjudged her entirely. Coco's reputation, her authority, and her unflinching poise created an invisible but undeniable force in the cabin. Passengers leaned forward slightly, captivated by the transformation, feeling the tension crackle in the air. With each passing minute, Coco's influence grew. The manager moved swiftly, acting on her instructions, notifying higher officials and preparing to implement immediate consequences. The flight attendants glanced at one another, uncertainty and fear mirrored in their expressions. Micro hooks rippled through the cabin. Who was Coco calling? What kind of authority did she hold? The passengers could only watch as the situation escalated under her calm control, understanding that the incident would not end quietly. Coco remained poised, her voice clear and commanding as she addressed the airline staff, outlining precise actions to be taken. The flight attendant who had struck her now stood frozen, the weight of guilt and fear evident in every movement. The cabin itself seemed to acknowledge Coco's authority, the murmurs settling into a tense silence as passengers and staff alike awaited the next move. Every subtle glance, every quiet nod from Coco reinforced that she was in control and that the consequences of crossing her would be immediate and unmistakable. By the time she concluded her calls and instructions, the entire staff was in disarray. Orders were being executed, managers were coordinating, and passengers whispered among themselves, astonished at the rapid turn of events. Coco Jones had shifted the balance entirely, transforming a moment of vulnerability into a display of unmistakable power. The airline staff understood now that they had underestimated her completely, and the storm they had inadvertently provoked was far from over. Every eye in the cabin remained on her, captivated by her composure, aware that this confrontation would be remembered long after the flight had landed. Within minutes, airline officials and security personnel arrived at Coco Jones's seat, moving quickly yet carefully through the tense first-class cabin. The atmosphere was electric, every passenger aware that the incident had escalated far beyond a simple misunderstanding. The staff responsible for the slap were immediately confronted, their confident facades crumbling as the weight of authority pressed down upon them. Some were asked to step aside, others frozen in place, realizing that consequences were imminent and unavoidable. Coco remained composed, her voice calm yet firm as she reiterated what had happened, leaving no room for denial or excuses. The airline manager took swift action, issuing suspensions and reassignments to the staff involved while drafting public apologies to acknowledge the egregious breach of conduct. Security made discreet arrangements to ensure no further incidents could occur, their presence reinforcing the seriousness of the situation. Passengers whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval, others expressing disbelief at how quickly the power dynamic had shifted. The flight attendants who had been hostile moments earlier now fumbled, their previous arrogance replaced by fear and uncertainty. They watched as Coco's poise remained unshaken, her dignity fully restored in a matter of minutes. Each movement, each deliberate gesture reminded the cabin that she commanded respect and that any attempts to undermine her authority would be met with swift and decisive consequences. The ripple effect extended beyond first class. Cabin crew in other sections were quietly briefed, realizing the incident had set a precedent that would be remembered long after landing. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, discussing the event in hushed tones, astonished by the display of composure and power. Some recorded short videos discreetly, capturing the tension and chaos for posterity. Conversations swirled around Coco's strength, her ability to navigate a humiliating and dangerous moment with grace and command. The cabin buzzed with energy, the previous calm shattered as the reality of the confrontation sunk in. Coco's baby rested quietly in her lap, unaware of the storm that had erupted around them, while Coco's steady hands and calm presence sent a clear message: dignity, strength, and authority would always prevail over arrogance and disrespect. The first-class cabin had transformed from a scene of tension and fear into a stage where justice was enacted swiftly, leaving staff shaken, passengers impressed, and the airline acutely aware that underestimating Coco Jones had been a grave mistake. Every glance, every whisper, every movement in the cabin now reflected the consequences of crossing her, and the chaos would echo long after the flight touched down. Coco Jones settled back into her seat, cradling her baby with gentle care, her hands steady and calm. She offered reassuring smiles to nearby passengers, her presence a quiet reminder that dignity and respect are non-negotiable, no matter the circumstances. The tension in the cabin began to ease. replaced by a sense of admiration and reflection as passengers realized the strength it takes to remain composed in the face of blatant disrespect. Her voice, soft yet firm, carried over the murmurs of first-class passengers as she calmly spoke about the importance of respect and justice. Every action she took reinforced the lesson that arrogance and hostility could never outweigh poise and integrity. The staff, now subdued, watched silently, understanding the depth of their mistake and the authority of the woman they had underestimated. Coco's calm authority left an indelible impression, demonstrating that true power lies not in aggression, but in control, composure, and the unwavering defense of one's dignity. Passengers exchanged quiet nods and murmured comments, acknowledging the strength Coco had displayed. The incident, which began as a moment of shock and humiliation, had transformed into a powerful lesson on respect, consequences, and the courage to confront wrongdoing without losing oneself. Coco's baby rested peacefully, a silent witness to the unwavering protection and guidance of a mother who refused to be undermined. That day, an entire airline learned a lesson it would never forget. The memory of the confrontation, the swift consequences, and Coco's composed authority would linger in the minds of staff and passengers alike, a reminder that dignity and justice can never be dismissed, and that true strength is revealed in moments when composure meets challenge. Courage, discipline, and awareness demand respect, and Coco Jones proved it in every action she took mid-flight. Her composure turned a shocking moment into a lesson no one aboard would ever forget. But what Coco did next mid-flight left everyone speechless, a move that no one saw coming. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in her place? Stay tuned for the next story to see how extraordinary moments reveal true strength and justice in unexpected ways.